Hi, my name is Scott Reida. I'm going to do a quick little walkthrough of a work sample. Specifically, we're going to be looking at a dashboard showing a workforce plan. We're going to be seeing how marketing campaigns can be divvied out across a group of 20 people and how it is split up into 5 different activity types and how those vary over the course of the year. Then we're going to step back a little bit and show how the components that went into that dashboard are actually created. All right, so I'm going to switch this to the other screen. Give me a moment. Okay, so this is the end state, and I really like to have something that's one page at a glance. You can kind of see everything all at once. So we get that in this view. So at the upper left, these are the 5 different kinds of activities that this team of 20 does. So you have direct mail, business to consumer, then email, and then events. Within each of these 3 options are available. So you can say best case scenario to worst case scenario. What that means is that's how long each of those activities would take to complete. So you can see 10.4 for direct mail B2B. That means it takes 10.4 hours to do each one of those activities. You can change this to be worst case, which is going to be a longer period of time, or the best case, which is going to be shorter. And as you can see, watch when I change email B2C, for instance, down here. Right now, we have 53.7 FTEs needed to actually do all of the work in October. If I change this to the worst case scenario, you'll see that jump up. And of course, if I change it to the best case, it'll be lower, down to 50. So for each of these 5 different activity types, you can change based on whether you want the worst, best, or most likely scenario. Also, what you have is dividing all of the hours of work by an FTE equivalent number of hours. The spot right here, you can change that. So right now we're basing a year off of 2,080 hours of work is 1 FTE. But if I want to make it less than that, let's just say 1,000 hours for a year is 1 FTE. Watch how the 53 hours of work changes for October. Quite a bit more people are needed. And as you can see, we also know what the gap in how many people we currently have versus how many we need is going to be. So we have 20 people, we need 111 worth of work. So 111 minus 20, so our gap is 91.7 FTEs for October. So let's go back to 2080. And on the upper right, this is a forecast along with our historic data for each activity type. So if I click on email B2C, I can see that most of the volume over the course of the year is from email B2C. I can also see there's a huge workload in that in October of our historic year as well as our planned future year. Now, you also can see that that is not the largest level of effort. However, when you combine the level of effort with the volume of email B2C, we can understand that this is what's driving most of our workload over the course of the year. On the lower right, we have each individual on the team, and at a glance, we can actually see who is the most burdened and who actually doesn't have a lot on their plate. So this orange, dark orange, is representing those periods of time where someone is very overutilized. The periods in blue are where they're underutilized. Now, we can see at an aggregate level on the left that we are almost always underutilized. So underneath this little 100% utilization line, we're pretty much always there, except when we're overloaded considerably just 2 times in the next year. If I click on any individual person like Mark, it'll filter to just him on the left-hand side. And on the top, I can see what work he is doing. So Mark is doing 2 types of activities, email B2C and direct mail B2B. And I can see that even during a peak time, he's doing some of each. So you can see 79 email B2Cs and 16 direct mail B2Bs are what he's doing in the month of October. So why does he have 16 and 79 of each activity type in October? We're going to come back to that in a little bit of how those are actually calculated. Okay, so let's rewind a little bit. So it all starts with the historic data. So when I want to create a workforce plan, I need two things. I need the level of effort for each activity they're doing, and I need to know how many of each one they're actually going to be completing at different times of the year. So I have historic data in this example. Here are each of my 20 colleagues. Here are the different campaign types that they are doing. So there are 5 of them. These are going to be what are considered independent variables. The dependent variable, so the thing that is produced as a result of those individual activities, is the number of hours that they actually work to complete them. So I have 1 dependent variable for each person and 5, whether it is populated or not, independent variables for each person. So what this means is Sally, for instance, worked 1,070 hours in the year we're using for our prediction, and she only did 150 email B2C. Only, I mean, only worked one kind of activity. Some people work more than one kind of activity. For instance, Keith or Vicky are working more than one type. And we're going to come back to that soon. So to create the dependent variable, everyone is a little different. And they're a little different because not everyone was working in the team the whole year. So we want to figure out who has a partial year. So I have a start date, a finish date, the finish date being the last day of the year. The start date, if it's, so long as it is, they were started at the beginning of the year, they are 100% billable to the department. Some people who started during the middle, they are partially billed to the department, or kind of a part-time employee, if you will. Now, we have part-time employees as well in a pure sense. So Scott, for instance, you can see 50%. So Scott is 50% billable to the team, regardless of when he started. And then we also have a little conversion to say if someone started before the year, we kind of baseline that to a maximum of 100% billable. So you multiply a few of these columns together to end up getting your dependent variable on the far right, hours applied. So this is what is being shown on the far right column on the prior tab. So why did we get these? We got these so that we can put them into a linear model, and my tool of choice is R. So this looks perhaps a little intimidating, but it is not nearly as bad as it may appear. So I'm going to drag it over just to show how it works. So you first create your table, and I use a CSV file for that. You bring that in, and that is this first line. And then to make a model, it is only one line of code. So I just say, my dependent variable is hours, my independent variables are each of these 5 here, and my data source is what I've dragged in on the top. Then I just make another field to say this, save summary here, and then print that. So it's only a few lines of code, and then you can come up with your result. So what's important in these results are the coefficients, the standard error, and the p-value. At least that's what I'm going to focus on. So what does this mean? Direct mail B2B 10.4. That means the garden variety direct mail B2B takes 10.4 hours to complete. Standard error, this shows how well are we defining it at that spot. So do we think are we really sure of that, or is the span all like plus or minus 10 hours on either side? In this case, it's plus or minus only 0.5 hours as standard error, but if you want to get a 95% interval, what you would do is the 10.4 plus and minus 2 times the standard error. So in this case, it's going to be 10.4 as an average, and then the low end, or the best case, would be 10.4 minus 2 times 0.5, and then of course the other side to get the worst case scenario, which would be more time per activity. The nice thing about this is I created this data to be fairly good, and I mean that nothing has values that are extraordinarily bad. So if you had a standard error, let's just say of 20 here, what that would mean is the 95% confidence interval for direct mail B2B would be 10 minus 2 times 20, and then plus 2 times 20. So you'd have a range of what is that, 40 hours above and below 10. So we don't have that, and that's represented quite well by the p-values. All of them are less than 0.05, considerably less. If you did have something that had a very significant range like that, your p-value would be considerably higher than 0.05, and it would be unreliable. All right, so that's how I get the level of effort. The other piece that we needed is the forecast. You could theoretically just copy and paste the historic year into the future year, but that wouldn't be very accurate because things change over time. In particular, direct mail is going down over time. Email, especially email B2C, is going up over time. So you want to account for that. And you also might have a different number of clients. The clients might have a different strategy. So there needs to be a little thought into how the forecast is done. So you want to have some client discussions. You want to routinely go back and say, you were a little off on this type of activity. Do we want to revise the future? So there is a bit of granular effort needed to create a good forecast. But in the end, we're going to go with what I have here. Now, you could stop at this point. You could just use this view for your entire workforce plan, as far as plus or minus the FTEs that you need. This bottom section, we get to that by taking the total number of activities. So October of 2020, for instance, has 40 direct mail B2B activities. All you have to do to get the number of hours needed to do that is to multiply the 40 times the level of effort for that type of activity, which is 10.4. So 40 times 10.4 gets you the 418. You divide that by your equivalent number of hours for an FTE, and that gives you 3.2 FTEs are needed to do the direct mail B2B work in October of 2020. You essentially do that for each activity type, and at the bottom, you sum it up as 44. So you have 44 FTEs worth of work. I actually have it on 19 and not 20 here, but you subtract 19 from the 44, and you find that you actually have a gap, or you take 19 minus 44, you have a gap of 25 FTEs to do the work. So you actually are short, and you're not going to be able to do that work for that month. One of the problems with tables like this is that you can't really see anything jump out at you. I want to be able to have at least a heat map, if you will, something colored to show me things that are not in our best interest. So this negative 25, this negative 50 FTEs over in 2021 for October, you need those things to jump out at you, and they don't really do that in a table. So that's one of the reasons it's good to make a dashboard where you can make a little bit better visualizations. So we know how many activities are happening, but we don't know how many yet are going to each person on the team. So what I used for that is Solver, which is a part of Excel. So I'm going to bring over that table really quick just to show how that is made. So this is what you saw a second ago. You've got your number of activities planned or completed in the historic section, multiplied by the number of hours that you're actually going to be needing to work to do them, and then you divide that by the FTEs. But on the far right over here, this is where we actually make our model. So this top section is how we limit who can do what kind of work. So I mentioned earlier that not everyone can do each kind of work. Perhaps they can be trained, but right now, just for simplicity's sake, I'm saying that they're only going to do in the future what they've done in the past. And also we're staying with the same number of colleagues, so that also is constant as well. So it's simply binary, 1 or 0. 1, they can do that kind of work, and 0, they don't. This next section is what the model is actually going to be changing. So it's going to be changing these values to ensure that we complete the number of activities in the requirement. So the requirement is what we saw in the table. So for instance, in January, we're going to complete this many of each activity type. So it's just going to pull in those values and say, I need to have at the end of the day that many activities being completed in January. So that is what goes in this orange section here. And it is simply summing up what is above to come up with the values in the green section. Now, down below, we have the total number of hours each person is working during this month period. So you can see Jean, for instance, is working 118 hours. That is below being fully utilized, which is given by this value here. So I am telling it that 2,080 hours is what makes one FTE over the course of a year. You divide that by 12 and you get 173. So the model is being told, make sure no one goes above that threshold, which is why you see no one above 173 here. The objective of the model is to minimize what is in cell AL74, which is essentially the sum of all of the hours. So we want to minimize the number of hours everyone on the team at an aggregate level is working. This lower section is just ensuring that the people who are given ones for specific activity types stay at one, as in I want to make sure Sally is restricted to only working email B2C. So that is what this is doing for the model. So let's just show what that looks like really quick. I'm going to zero this out for each person. So right now what this is saying is no one is assigned any work, yet this is the amount of work we need done in each activity type. So I open up Solver. I see that the objective, AL74, the objective is to have the minimum number of hours. So min, that's all that does. I'm going to be changing the number of activities each person does in this section. These are my constraints. You can see at the top, I say integer. That means each person is going to be working one campaign, so they're not doing partials of each campaign. That's for simplicity's sake. So I just simply click solve and get opened on the other screen. This is what we want to see. So Solver found an integer solution within tolerance, so that's good. It's going to be auto-populated for me already, so you can see everyone has a number of activities they're going to complete. And you can see that all of the activities we have on the, I guess on the desired plate of activities is indeed matching, so that is what we want. And the total number of hours necessary to complete this list of work is 1835 for that month for our list of colleagues. So I essentially just repeat this for each month and put it in the section on the far right. So you can see just at a glance, for instance, Tom on direct mail B2B is doing this many activities over time for each month. So then let's go to the next step, which is going back to the dashboard. What you see here is essentially that same data by each person, but on the last view, it was showing each activity one by one. In this view, it actually aggregates all of the types of work they do in one spot. So this is really convenient because I can see for each person who is overburdened, who has a little more time to perhaps be redistributed to maybe learn other activity types so that you can reduce the burden on other people. One other thing I want to mention on this is watch what you can do by changing the scenario. So right now, I have the 53, I can make it the best case scenario, which is 50, but imagine if you were looking at a new technology to perhaps automate email B2C. What if you could change it to 2 hours? That would essentially reduce this burden of 50 FTEs, the 30 FTE overage you have in October to considerably less. So this is a good way you can actually test different scenarios of emerging technologies that are in your particular area. And with that, I'm going to stop talking about the dashboard and just please let me know if you have any questions, put them in the comments or send me an email. And thank you for your time.